I'm Mariah Carey.
Mariah Carey. Depending on your age or your taste in music, that name could conjure up all sorts of thoughts. The Queen of Christmas, the diva to end all divas, that wild glitter era, the Mimi comeback, those one-word song and album titles that sound like candy. Or maybe, for the Gen Z crowd, I don't know her. But for me, Mariah Carey is the reason I became obsessed with the Billboard Hot 100. She's the artist who turned music charts into a sport. See, long before streaming made it possible for every album track to flood the charts overnight, charting on the Hot 100 was earned. You needed radio airplay, you needed physical sales, and you needed your record label to work like a machine behind you. So, when a brand new, completely unknown solo artist drops 5 consecutive singles, and each and every one of them reaches #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, that's not luck. That's strategy. That's world-class songwriting. That's versatility. And that's one of the greatest chart debuts in pop music history. Hi, I'm Roger, your resident pop charts nerd, and today I'm taking you back to the moment Mariah Carey exploded onto the American charts with a run so flawless, it felt scripted. We're diving into each of her first 5 #1 hits, the industry machine that made it happen, the chart tricks her record company may have pulled, for better or worse, and the 6th single that just missed, snapping one of the most iconic streaks in Billboard history. If you thought you already knew this story, stick around. There's more going on here than you think. Let's get into it.
Treated me kind, sweet destiny.
Before the #1 singles and platinum plaques, there was just a demo tape. It was the late 80s and Mariah Carey had been grinding quietly in New York City after finishing high school on Long Island, writing songs with Ben Margulies, working odd jobs, singing backup for Brenda Kay's Star, and hustling to get noticed. Her fateful moment came when Star took 18-year-old Mariah to a record industry party, where her demo cassette landed in the hands of Tommy Mottola, then head of Columbia Records. Legend has it, he listened in his limo, was stunned by what he heard, and turned the car around to find her. Within weeks, Mariah had a record deal with Columbia, a subsidiary of Sony Music. Most importantly, Columbia was a label desperate for its answer to Whitney Houston, who'd burst onto the scene a few years earlier. Mottola didn't want just a hit. He was craving a superstar, someone who could dominate both pop and R&B charts and airwaves, someone who could sell albums and singles, someone who could become the voice of the 1990s. So, Columbia launched one of the most expensive debut campaigns the industry has ever seen. Mariah was styled, coached, promoted, and paired with top-tier producers. But crucially, and this is often overlooked, all of the songs on her debut album were co-written by Mariah herself. She wasn't just a singer, she was a songwriter and vocal arranger, and she knew exactly how she wanted to sound. The first single, Vision of Love, a version of which was written before her record deal, but reimagined into a soaring, gospel-infused power ballad. It introduced her vocal range and those iconic whistle notes to the world. Vision of Love didn't merely announce Mariah Carey to the world, it redefined what a pop vocal could sound like. Its melismatic phrasing, gospel influences, and whistle notes became a blueprint that influenced literally hundreds of talent show contestants and aspiring singers for years to come. Everyone from Beyoncé to Kelly Clarkson to Ariana Grande cited it as a vocal masterclass. Now here's where the chart nerd part kicks in. Vision of Love debuted at number 73 on the Billboard Hot 100 in June 1990. A modest start by today's standards, But back then, that was actually a strong debut for a brand new artist, albeit with a huge promotional push. This was pre-SoundScan, which meant chart positions were based on manually reported sales and airplay, a system often described as opaque and fudgeable. Nowadays, sales, streams and airplay are much more precisely tracked.
She's making her national television debut. Her single is called Vision of Love. This is Mariah Carey. Give it up.
The music world was abuzz with its rising star, stunned by her powerful vocals, on record and in her first TV appearances. And Vision of Love soared to #1 in its 10th week on the Hot 100. And when it got there in August, it stayed for 4 consecutive weeks, succeeding Glenn Medeiros and Bobby Brown's She Ain't Worth It to become the 723rd #1 in that chart's history.
Seeing my name on the #1 slot in Billboard. First, it's like seeing my name at all on the charts. It's like, number 53. And then as it goes up, you know, it's a continuous process.
Vision of Love was more than a hit. It was a statement, not only topping Billboard's pop chart, but also its adult contemporary, R&B, and crossover rankings. It stamped Mariah as a future titan of record sales and the charts, the kind who could dominate across formats. The song would go on to win one of Mariah's first Grammys for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. With her debut album recorded, and while on an early promo tour, Mariah played a rough demo of a new ballad to Columbia execs, a song she'd just written with Ben Margulies called Love Takes Time, with her second album in mind. The label flipped. Columbia executives were so convinced this was a hit that they made a rare and expensive decision. They halted production of her already finished Mariah Carey album, which was literally being manufactured, and rushed Love Takes Time onto it. The song was added so late that the first batch of cassettes and CDs didn't list it on the back cover. It's in there, just uncredited, like a ghost hit. Released as the second single in August 1990, Love Takes Time was everything Columbia wanted the public to associate with Mariah. Emotional, powerful, and mature. It showed she wasn't just a vocal gymnast, she could feel a song. It debuted just like Vision of Love at number 73, an uncanny coincidence, and climbed steadily throughout the early fall. But its chart journey was actually faster than her debut. Love Takes Time reached #1 in just 9 weeks, giving Mariah her second chart topper in a row. It held the top spot for 3 weeks. What made Love Takes Time stand out was how emotionally classic it sounded. It could have easily been sung by Barbra Streisand or even a young Celine, but Mariah gave it a fresh R&B meets pop softness that made it accessible to multiple radio formats. The song also marked the start of her creative partnership with producer Walter Afanasieff, a man who would go on to co-write and co-produce many of her most beloved ballads, including Hero and One Sweet Day, and of course the modern-day festive standard, All I Want for Christmas Is You. So, with 2 #1s from her debut album and her credibility as a writer, vocalist, and commercial force building, Mariah Carey was officially on a streak. By the end of 1990, Mariah Carey had proven she could dominate the ballad space. But to truly cement her place in pop, she needed to show she could do more than sing to a slower tempo. And that's where Someday came in.
Just think again, 'cause I won't need your love anymore. Yeah. You were so blind to let me go. You had it all, but you didn't.
Chosen as the third single from her debut album, Someday was a deliberate pivot. Bright, bold, beat-driven. Mariah co-wrote it with Ben Margulies, but the final version was reworked into a polished, danceable track by producer Rick Wake. The song leaned into the new jack swing movement, a genre that was red hot at the time, blending R&B vocals with hip-hop inspired beats.
I'm very fortunate to have had 2 #1 records, and for my first 2 records ever put out. And of course, it's like now it's like you don't really want to pay attention to it, but you're like, okay, looking at the chart. So I went up this week, I went down this week, whatever. But you know, just as long as I can have a long career and continue to sing.
But here's the twist. Mariah hated the final mix. She preferred the raw, horn-heavy demo version, which had a more aggressive, funky edge.
I hate it. I have no words. No, I would keep some of the close-ups, and that's it. Everything else, I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know why they were allowing this tomfoolery to occur. I don't know. The little girl was cute. Okay, bye.
Still, the charts didn't care. Someday debuted on the Hot 100 in January 1991, quickly gaining traction on pop and R&B stations alike. And by early March, less than 2 months later, it became Mariah's third consecutive #1. It only spent 2 weeks at the top, but those weeks mattered, because while Someday was climbing, something even bigger was happening in the background. Her debut album, Mariah Carey, which had been out for 8 months at that point, was climbing too. On March 2, 1991, fueled by 3 consecutive smash hit singles and her recent Best New Artist win at the Grammys, Mariah Carey hit #1 on the Billboard 200 albums chart. And it didn't just touch the summit, it stayed there for 11 consecutive weeks. Mariah Carey had officially arrived. And Someday had done its job. It showed Mariah could be rhythmic, radio-friendly, young, even a little cocky. But now Columbia had a choice: lean further into the dance pop sound or double down on the emotional ballads that made her a powerhouse. They chose to go deep again, and what came next was the most quietly suspenseful chart climb of her career so far. By spring 1991, Mariah Carey had a perfect 3-for-3 run of #1 hits. But Columbia Records knew the 4th single would be a critical test. Would audiences still be interested, or was the streak about to end? Their pick was I Don't Wanna Cry, a smouldering ballad co-written with Narada Michael Walden. Mariah's first single release, not written with Ben Margulies. It was more stripped down and intimate, a late-night breakup confession with cinematic strings, Latin flavour, and a dramatic vocal build. When I Don't Wanna Cry debuted on the Hot 100 in April 1991, it climbed week by week, breaking into the top 20 by May. But then, as it entered the top 10, it stayed at #8 for 2 straight weeks. Columbia's first hint of stalled momentum in their juggernaut's meteoric rise. They weren't going to risk losing the streak. Behind the scenes, Columbia pushed hard. Increased radio promotion, retail pushes. Whatever they did, it worked. In its 8th week on the chart, I Don't Wanna Cry made a dramatic leap from #8 to #1, the biggest rise to the top spot since 1977, and giving Mariah her 4th consecutive Hot 100 chart topper. A perfect 4-for-4 from her debut album. It stayed there for 2 weeks, cementing the narrative that Mariah wasn't just lucky, she was officially a force of nature. While it extended her #1 streak, I Don't Wanna Cry isn't among Mariah's favourites from her debut era. She's spoken about feeling creatively sidelined during the writing process with Narada Michael Walden, with many of her vocal ideas ultimately left out of the final version. It was the middle of 1991 and Mariah Carey was riding high. 4 singles, 4 Hot 100 number ones, 2 Grammys, an 11-week run atop the Billboard 200. And yet, Columbia didn't stop to celebrate. They moved immediately into her next album cycle to ride the momentum. So, just 15 months after her first album dropped, Mariah returned with her sophomore LP, Emotions. The title track was a curveball. Instead of sticking to safe ballads or pop R&B, Emotions paid homage to 1970s disco and gospel. Produced with Robert Clavillis and David Cole of C&C Music Factory, it featured bubbly piano chords, layered harmonies, and of course, Mariah's now iconic whistle notes flying into the stratosphere. Released in late August 1991, Emotions debuted strong, fueled by anticipation, heavy airplay, and Columbia's marketing muscle. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in just its 7th week, knocking Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch's Good Vibrations out of the top spot. It stayed there for 3 weeks, and with that, Mariah Carey had done the unthinkable. 5 singles, 5 number ones, the first and still the only artist in Billboard Hot 100 history to begin their career this way. Not even the Beatles did it. Not Elvis, not Michael, not Whitney. This wasn't just a chart stat, it was pop culture history. As Emotions was wrapping up its 3-week reign at number 1 in October 1991, all eyes turned to what Mariah would release next. The pressure had never been higher. Every step now felt like legacy writing in real time. Columbia chose Can't Let Go, an ethereal, heartbreak-filled ballad co-written with Walter Afanasieff, as the second single from the Emotions album. And emotionally, it delivered. Mariah's vocals were softer, more restrained, still technically flawless, but dripping with vulnerability. Critics praised it, fans loved it. And for me, Can't Let Go delivered some of Mariah's most iconic live performances from her early years. If ever, check out her SNL and Arsenio appearances.
Do you know the way it feels when all you have to die? Try to deny that I need you, but still you remain on my mind. No, I just can't get you out of my mind.
Despite a solid debut and just a 4-week climb into the top 10, her fastest to that point, Can't Let Go took another 4 weeks to make the top 5, peaking at number 2 for a solitary frame. The first time Mariah had released a single that didn't rule the Hot 100. So, what kept Can't Let Go from number 1? 2 things. First, competition. This was early 1992, and in the week Can't Let Go peaked at number 2, look at the other songs in the top 10. Smash after smash after smash. But more controversially, label strategy. Multiple industry insiders have since suggested that Columbia deliberately limited the commercial availability of Can't Let Go as a physical single, a tactic known as album protection. Back then, the Billboard Hot 100 was based solely on radio airplay and physical single sales. If too many people bought the single, they might not buy the album. And Emotions, the album, had debuted at number 4, a respectable position, but far from the 11th week domination her debut album had enjoyed. So the theory is this: Columbia may have sacrificed a 6th number 1 to protect album sales. And whether or not it was intentional, it worked, sort of. The album saw a brief sales bump. The single peaked 1 spot short. The streak was over. No headlines, no scandal, just a quiet, graceful end to one of the most impressive opening runs in music history. Five singles, 5 number ones, 14 total weeks atop the Billboard Hot 100 in less than a year and a half. It's a stat that still hasn't been repeated. And it didn't happen because of luck. It happened because of meticulous planning by Columbia Records, a once-in-a-generation voice, strong, versatile songwriting, and a little bit of good timing, smart marketing, and industry savvy. Mariah Carey didn't burst onto the scene like a viral sensation. She built her streak one song at a time. Each release was tailored to show a different facet of her artistry, from gospel power to pop balladry, from New Jack Swing to torch songs and R&B disco. She demonstrated right out of the gate that she was not just another one-note, label-built diva. And when the streak ended with Can't Let Go, it didn't take anything away from what came before. In fact, it arguably gave the streak more meaning, because it reminded us this wasn't guaranteed. Chart success is fragile. Even the best songs can fall short, sometimes for reasons that have nothing to do with the music itself. The beauty of Mariah's early run is that it wasn't just a commercial success, it was a cultural statement. That a 20-year-old woman of mixed race heritage, writing and producing her own material, could step into an industry dominated by older, whiter, more established acts, and not only hold her own, but dominate the charts. That mattered. It still matters. Mariah Carey would go on to score 19 Billboard Hot 100 #1s, more than any other solo artist, spend well over 90 weeks at #1 and counting, the outright record for all artists. And she would write or co-write all but one of those 19 #1s. But it all started with 5 defining singles, 5 trips to the top, 5 steps into history. So the next time someone calls Mariah just the Queen of Christmas, tell them about this era. Tell them about how she came out of the gate swinging and rewrote the rules of pop success. Tell them about the streak. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Roger, your Pop Charts nerd, and if you love stories about the stats, the strategies, and the songs that shaped pop music, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until then, keep watching those charts. Bye for now.
Turned out to be.
Mariah Carey.